All right, boys and girls, here we go. Chapter 7. The last chapter in Miss Gooney Bird. Then we will start our next book called Gooney the Fabulous. Here we go. Gooney Bird looked around the classroom. She slid the strap of her cowhide purse from her shoulder and set the purse on the floor below the terrarium table. With her face scrunched into a quiet, thinking expression, she unbuttoned her orange fur jacket and hung it on the back of the chair by her desk. Then she returned to the front of the room and faced the class. She was wearing a blue plaid skirt, a white blouse, black tights, and brown lace-up shoes. There were bright blue hair ribbons in her neatly brushed red hair. She looked ordinary. She looked dignified. She looked wise. There she is. Out there, invisible, are a lot of stories not yet told, Gooney Bird told the class. Absolutely true ones? Beanie asked in a small voice. Yes, absolutely true ones. What are they? Asked Beanie. Do you remember that my first story was called How Gooney Bird Got Her Name? Gooney Bird asked. Yes, Beanie replied. Well, another is called How Beanie Got Her Name. Before I was born, Beanie said, laughing, there was a thing called an ultrasound that showed me curled up inside my mom, and I looked just like a bean. My mom said, Lima bean, and my dad said, no, jelly bean. And so that's a fine story beginning, Gooney Bird said, an absolutely true one. You should tell that one Friday, Beanie. What other invisible stories are out there? Mrs. Pigeon asked. Do you remember my second story? It was about how I came from China on a flying carpet? Oh, my, yes, Mrs. Pigeon said. I had to look up China in the atlas. Out there, invisible and waiting, Gooney Bird said, is a story called... Let me think. She closed her eyes. Is that the title? Let me think, Malcolm asked. No, Gooney Bird opened her eyes. The story is called How Kaiko's Family Came to Water Tower. Kaiko smiled. Well, they started out on a ship, she said. First, my grandmother and grandfather got in a big ship in Yokohama and went to Honolulu. They were a little scared because they had never been to America before. Mrs. Pigeon, you should get the atlas out. Mrs. Pigeon smiled. I will when you tell your story, Kaiko. Maybe next Wednesday. Okay, Kaiko said. And I'll bring some pictures, and how about if I wear a kimono? That wouldn't be distracting like whiskers, would it? It would be lovely, Gooney Bird said. And I could maybe carry a fan and a parasol? Gooney Bird said gently. That would be a little like whiskers, Kaiko. Overdoing it? Kaiko asked. Overdoing it, Gooney Bird said. What about me? Asked Barry. Do I have a story? Of course you do, Gooney Bird said. You have stories called How Barry Got His Name and How Barry's family came to Water Tower and lots of others. Barry grinned. Which one should I tell? He asked. Do you remember my third story about the diamond earrings? Barry nodded. My suggestion is that when it's your turn, Barry, you should tell an absolutely true story called When Harry Spent Every Penny He Had on Something He Really Wanted Badly. The class waited and watched Barry Tuckerman as he squinched up his face, thinking. Then he grinned. Okay, he said. I'll tell it, but it's really, really gross. Oh, no, said Kaiko. I hate gross. You can cover your ears for Barry's story, Gooney Bird told her. Wear earmuffs that day. Green ones would go nicely with your red sweater, I think. Who else? What else? The class called. My fourth story was called How Gooney Bird Directed an Orchestra. Mrs. Pigeon suggested. Maybe we could skip that one, Gooney Bird. I know no one in the class has ever led an orchestra. Class, Gooney Bird asked, has anyone here ever been late to school because something quite unusual happened? Almost every hand went up. Malcolm, Gooney Bird said. Maybe that story could be your assignment. It could be called Why Malcolm Was Late to School. It could be about the time I was asleep under my bed and my mother couldn't find me in the morning, Malcolm said. Or the time that I dropped my toothbrush in the toilet and I tried to get it back and I